Hello friends, welcome to my channel Power of AEM. This is the second video where we are exploring and testing the Open API. In the previous video, we have discussed about the use cases, where to use, when to use, and some scenarios. So let's start with exploring of Open API. Open API are giving us the REST endpoints to play around with the content which we are storing in AEM modules. As we discussed, modules could be assets, sites, and forms. In assets, we can perform any of the delivery of any of the binary asset and the metadata and associated events. However, the CRUD operations are not available for all of the assets. Content fragment is only one of the feature or availability where we can perform all the CRUD operations. We will explore and test that in few minutes. Now let's talk about the sites. Page related events in terms of creating, modify, delete, or publish and unpublish. We can capture those events and based on that, we can perform different operations. For forms, we can get the forms data, which we are storing on JCR repository, submit the forms, and also can generate document of records. So these operations we can do on the forms. When we are talking about how we can use Open API, there are different mechanisms to use that. If we are having some different application, for example, you are having web application or SPA or server to server calls, in these scenarios, we can think for Open API to use. However, whenever we are interacting with the Open API, we need to pass the authentication, and that authentication could be OAuth based. If we are talking about the web app where we need a kind of individual credential or a credential that we can use in order to do different operations. For that purpose, we need to create that individual user credential or a common credential which we can store on the web app to interact with OpenAPI. However, whenever we are talking about any other application where we cannot store the client secrets, in that kind of cases, we need to think on a kind of layer which can help us to interact with the Open API. On the another method, which is server to server calls, in server to server calls, we need to pass the token based authentication. Again, those token could be a technical user account that we can leverage for in order to hit the Open API. Let's test the APIs. Before we start testing of the API, we need to know some prerequisite and steps to follow. First, the AEM environment should be with your latest version. If we are talking about your AEM, the cloud service environment is not up to date, or might be, you are using the old version of cloud implementation, these APIs will not work properly. So make sure you should have the latest version. Any user that you want to use or any module that you want to use in terms of pulling out the information through OpenAPI, we need to first assign a product profile for that. For example, if you are just playing with the assets, make sure you are providing the profile related to assets and that's related services. So in such case, we cannot pull the information from sites and forms. As we are giving the limited access to pull out the information, we are restricting all the calls to interact with the AEM system. Whenever we are playing or creating a profile, we also making sure we are aligning the relevant services in that. How we can do that? We can quickly look at that. So as you can see, this is the public documentation where we are creating a new profile, and that profile is talking about we are going to access assets on a certain program and environment. Once that profile is available, we also need to enable the service. So service should be AEM Asset API user. So this kind of service should be enabled for us in terms of use the OpenAPI on assets. Similarly, if you are going to use any assets, non-asset platform for or non-asset module like forms or sites, you need to create a profile like that and need to align the relevant service for that particular product profile. This is something which you need to do on the admin console. However, when we are talking about to interact with any of the application, as we were discussing in the previous slide, if you are having any web app and in the web app you want to store the credential to interact with the Open API, that is also something which you can do. And in such cases, you need to generate the keys. Might be you need to create a new Adobe IO project, and in that IO project, you need to place a YAML file, which will be helpful to guide your request where they want to connect. It could be your authoring tier, publish tier, or preview tier. So based on that, you can take a decision where you want to connect, as those are already captured in your IO project. And once that is done, you can deploy your overall code in terms of making availability of that YAML file across the platform. So let's go ahead and see how you can generate the, the different tokens in terms of server to server calls. So for server to server calls, Adobe is providing the console that we can use. Again, it is available publicly, so you can use those consoles publicly. You can use any of the REST end client in terms of testing the API. Also, if you are thinking to do any kind of CRUD operations on content fragment, think for to have a external project or a project based on Adobe IO. In terms of generating the token, you can go on your developer console and can select integration, then local token. And by using that, you can generate a token. These token we are going to use in the Swagger API, which is providing by Adobe and the REST end client. So let's quickly go and check how many different APIs or REST endpoints are exposed by Adobe. So all these endpoints are available for us in the public documentation, as you can see. These endpoints we can use to play around the fragments. As you can see on the left hand side, all information are related to content fragments. These endpoints are available for us. Let's start with getting all the content fragments. What we need to do, we need to hit the try button. It will open up the boxes where we need to provide the bucket information and the token, which we just discussed how you can generate the local token. So once you are having that local token, you can place it in the security section. Parameters you need to provide. Again, you have to look what are the contract in terms of query parameters. Based on that, you can provide all the uh, relevant information in the query parameters. And you just need to hit the send or resend button. At the last, you will get the response. As you can see, we are in the response tab. It is talking about the different information which we are getting from this as a response. And so we have received all the content fragments which we pulled out. So in one of the content fragment, every content fragment is having its own unique ID. So let's copy this in order to understand how much information we are getting from this content fragment. However, it is talking about or sharing all the information like which model it is based on, if we do have any validation or the fields associated with that, any variation tags and other information. However, unique ID is the common uh, metadata which is helpful to identify a particular content fragment. Currently, we have pulled out all the content fragment available in the system, but if I want to pull only one content fragment, I need to hit the call get a content fragment, and here I just need to supply the unique ID, my content fragment ID, and once I resend, it will show me all the information which I have used in order to create the content fragment. This is the information which we are getting as a response for that particular content fragment. In the same way, we can use the APIs. As API is already exposed, it is talking about what could be the default uh, way to call it. And if I'm going here, it is showing the REST endpoint. What is the REST endpoint? And what could be the further call? So what I need to do, I need to go in my REST end client. This is my REST end client where I have placed the call and the parameters which I want to supply with my request, and the authentication bearer token. And once I'm sending it, it is giving me the response. So that is how you can add. Thanks for watching, and please do subscribe and like my channel.